Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 248, titled One by One. Anywhozers, hey everybody, welcome. Let's just get into the chapter. Okay, so this chapter this week, I guess we'll start with general thoughts as the usual. Um, I feel like this chapter, you'd call it a direct continuation. Really, it feels like this is part two of chapter 247. And when I was reading this chapter, for me personally, I felt like the pacing slowed down even more. And I think that's just a product of how verbose the chapter is in general. Like, there's a lot of dialogue panels. But yeah, I feel 247, 248, they go well together. There's a nice continuous flow between them. One thing I do want to say is I very much enjoyed what the chapter was about. This is what I personally enjoy a lot. If I could have my way, honestly, in my ideal world, there would be, like for every person that had a quirk, there would be a full page of an Izuku level explanation describing every little thing that was relevant about the quirk in one go. But that's I understand that is aggressive, but then you have moments like these where the author it slows down and he gives you like a lot of little details about the people's quirks and where they're going, and it's just like, yeah, I love this. You can't give me the Izuku level of exposition that you gave last week, but you can give this, and it's like, okay, cool, author, I'm into it. So for me, as a reader that enjoys this type of stuff, I really enjoyed the chapter, even if it is just kind of like simple things. They're ultimately just telling you like where exactly the characters are developing, so what kind of direction they're going in, and I really appreciate that. I really like that the author took the time and slowed down here, and pretty much broke up or pretty much presented the same kind of idea across two chapters. That is the development of these three kids. I really appreciate it. I loved it. Awesome. I would assume that for people that like the battles and all that, I would assume that these type of chapters may not be your cup of tea because you're not really into the training aspect. But for the power development, I think this is absolutely valuable. It's good that we're taking the time to go through this and to just make sure, or just to show that that the author has thought this through. So those are my general thoughts for the structure of the chapter. Really enjoyed it. I loved reading through everything there. Like I said, it is a direct continuation of chapter 247, and I feel like this one's even slower than 247. But hey, we're dwelling on powers. That is cool. One last thing that I do want to say before we get into the chapter proper is pretty much thoughts on the final page. Last week we started off with talking about Fuyumi in general, and then this week there she is again at the end of the page. So it's one thing for me to say last week that there's going to be a resolution with the Todoroki family, but then you come in this week and it's like, okay, now what the author did, putting this girl in the chapters 2 times in a row and now 3 times in a row, he was pretty much setting it up like, hey guys, Fuyumi's gonna have a presence here, and now look, she's taking the control of the narrative and she's working. She's gonna try and get involved with the group. I guess in 2 weeks we're gonna be seeing her, maybe, most likely. So when I see that there, we're now what we're doing now is that we're having a training arc that is, okay, my words, how do I say this one? Okay, there's a training arc, but the substance in it is coming from the family storyline from the Todorokis. So that's how the author is going to make a training arc interesting, because as you see in that final page, like we go 1 week later, we're skipping because, like, to some degree, just flat training is kind of monotonous. The kids are just learning by trial and error, trying to accumulate experience. There's no real need to show that, so you need to make it interesting by having that emotional plot line in there, and I think that's what the author is doing there. Now, honestly, if you ask me what could the author do at the Todoroki household, I would be like, I don't know, man. Like, look at how old-fashioned the house is. We know that there's a lot of gags that come out of from how old-fashioned Shoto is. So, are we gonna get that? Maybe. Like, if we want to be like super hardcore creative, I would say, maybe we'll bring up Toya. Maybe there'll be some Toya drama. Maybe if Toya is Dabi, we have to like start building up that narrative force for that. So we could maybe have this whole like just sad moment occurring at the Todoroki household. Maybe Dabi shows up. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of extremes that could happen here, but I wouldn't expect an extreme situation to occur when everyone is at the Todoroki household. But even that, it seems kind of strange to be putting Bakugo and Izuku in the center of the Todoroki problems. Now, mind you, we know that Fuyumi herself, we know what her rhetoric is. We know that this girl wants her family to be perfect. We know that she would rather... Well, I want to be careful, but we know that she wants the family to get along. Like, she's pretty much at a point where she just wants to let bygones be bygones and just restart and just have a happy life, right? She wants to have her family back together again. We know that's the character. We know that's where she stands. We've seen this in the background throughout all her appearances. Is that rhetoric going to be present at this dinner? Maybe. Who knows? It depends on what the author wants to do. If he wants to go into full family drama, he very well could. And he has the perfect character to do that with Fuyumi. Because Fuyumi wants something, and she wants this image of that perfect family, and she wants it now, in spite of all the trauma that's occurred in the household. And mind you, like, gotta be careful with the way you're talking about Fuyumi here, because it's a sensitive situation. But we do know that she's rooting for the family coming back together. Seeing her at the end there, though, it really does make me feel that, yeah, she is the one that was praying at the end of chapter 246. So really cool to see her here. I think the author did a pretty good thing in making sure that he presented her in the previous 2 chapters, because that pretty much gave her, like, this doesn't come out of nowhere. Fuyumi has been in the background for the last 2 chapters, so I really enjoyed that personally. Anyway, let's just get into the proper read through and see if we can spot anything else. So the first page, and I kind of like this, was a shot of the girls, Ochako, Suyu, and Nejiri, off with the Ryukyu team. So one thing here is that it makes me want to ask you guys, which characters would you like to see in maybe a cover page? One Piece does cover page stories. I feel like the author could do cover page stories too while we're doing this little training arc, just showing off of just one panel of all the of some of the characters doing some stuff with their teams. I think that would be really neat. If he's not going to dive into what they're actually doing, at least, you know, give us like a quick shot. So which characters would you be curious about seeing in a cover page? Let me know. Anyway, that was a great page, and we move into the chapter proper. So page 1 is just a nice little flashback, a recap, kinda like Izuku's just giving us information about where he sees himself in all of this. The thing I found most interesting here was the final little bit of that first page, where Izuku's saying that he forced himself to learn how to use it subconsciously. Also, I'm using the Japanese box translation this week. The translations aren't too different from what I recall. Anyway, Izuku's talking about that, using it subconsciously. So that was interesting because I don't think that we had this ever really fleshed out, him using it subconsciously. I think we've like seen the little moments where Izuku's talked about when he raised the output, but it doesn't lend itself well to saying that he was using it subconsciously. You know, like that rhetoric, I think, is only coming out here because Izuku had someone questioning him, right? Because Endeavour is there and he's giving these guys the terms that they gotta think in. You know, now Izuku's like looking back on his experience and thinking about, okay, yeah, I was kind of using this just automatically. Because for me, you know, Izuku trains it and then he goes into the Stain fight, and the Stain fight, he's using it well enough. There aren't really any kind of errors in his use of it. And I think this might just be from general anime logic. Like, you never really think about characters using things subconsciously. Like, you just see them using it and you just assume, oh, like he's using that very quickly. So I did like that they took a little bit of time to just say, like, yes, there was a period where Izuku just learned to turn it on in a flash. Maybe it didn't require as many mental resources. We know that mental resources are the resource that we're trying to optimize as we're going into this with Izuku. So that's pretty cool that the rhetoric has kind of changed. Next, we go into page 4 on Japanese box. This one is where they're chasing after the guy on the bike. Now, there was something really cool here in that page. You did get to see the fire covering that second route. And so, you know, when I'm reading the page, I just saw that and it's just like, oh yeah, great. You know, I didn't see the value in that until Endeavour pointed it out later. And I really like that the author's doing that. He's showing stuff and then he's saying like, hey, actually, that was really impressive. And it's like, oh, okay, thanks for telling me, author. Yeah, yeah, I get it. That was really impressive. From there, we move into page 5 with the other relevant thing. And the relevant thing in page 5 is, of course, the exposition that we get from Todoroki and Bakugo as they're talking about what Endeavour is doing. So pretty much Shoto is just saying that Endeavour is using, he has really precise manipulation of the fire that he is outputting. And then Bakugo's coming in and saying like, yeah, that's pretty much what I do with my explosion. And then berating Todoroki for taking so long to figure that out. But what I really enjoyed here was that this established a pretty nice distinction between Shoto and Endeavour. Like when you think about precise manipulation of a quirk, and you think about Shoto, you don't think about precise manipulation of a quirk. Like even going back to the Class 1A versus Class 1B fight, you see the way that Shoto produces ice, and there's not really much precision in the ice being formed. It's just a burst of ice. Shoto's use of ice itself is pretty much like what you would imagine fire made solid would look like. There's not precise manipulation. I guess the better way to imagine it is like Shoto can't create a perfect ice shield. He can create like a block of ice, but that's not a perfect ice shield. There's not that sculpting of the ice. And so like that's how I think about it when Shoto is talking here. He's using his fire a lot, but he doesn't use it in the precise way that you could say Endeavour uses it. Conversely though, precise coordinated action describes Bakugo's use of his quirk really well. And that's really interesting because Bakugo in particular, his quirk by nature is not very precise. It's an explosion. It's something that emanates from a central focal point. It spreads out. And yet Bakugo is able to use that emanation, that random, or not, it's not a random emanation, but you know, it's a wide emanation. He's able to use it to propel himself in very precise ways. So when Bakugo says that, yeah, it's a total ripoff of Explosion, it's like, yes, he's actually correct because Bakugo is using it in a way that could be compared to what Endeavour is doing. Although I think as you go into the chapter, you could see that the big difference between Endeavour and Bakugo in that regard is that Bakugo's magnitude of explosion, like how much force he can generate to propel himself forward, may not be as concentrated as Endeavour's use of it. Anyway, that page also had a little comedy element of Bakugo saying that there's something that Shoto noticed, so he should just say it to feel better. And then someone making the comment that Bakugo is petty, and that was set up for something else in the chapter. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I found that to be a really interesting exchange between the two. And I think it's good that the author had Shoto talking to Bakugo about it, because as Endeavour points out later, these two are the ones who have something to learn from Endeavour's use of that particular technique. So that was really cool. Then we move into page 6. Page 6 is where Endeavour teaches us, like, that path opens to the main road, so he had to cut it off. Gives a context to what he did earlier. You had the guy being supportive of the sidekicks or of the interns going forward and learning stuff. And then at the bottom of that page, you have really interesting rhetoric from Endeavour, that being that a hero has to be someone who is able to handle every role on their own. Now that is interesting because we know that not all heroes are made equal. We know that some heroes just are better at handling some things than others. Some heroes are just better suited for natural disaster response. But here you have Endeavour saying, like, yeah, no, if you want to be the best of the best, you got to be able to cover many bases. And we do see him covering a lot of bases within the chapter itself. So it's really interesting rhetoric when we're talking about what makes a true hero here. Anyway, we also have that little bit where Endeavour is saying that he noticed the glass villains before anyone else did. And then Bakugo calling him out for being petty. And you have Izuku commenting on it, like with the Kachan. Like that right there, that and the previous part where someone called Bakugo petty, obviously that's there to establish commonality. That's there to establish that these guys are, yes, they are very similar to each other. These are the same people with the same kind of ego. So I'm sure that when Izuku saw that, he's just thinking, that's you. This is what you do. So I do love the little comedic dynamic that's going on there. But yeah, we go into page 7, and here is Endeavour giving a personalized lesson for Bakugo. And of course, this has a lot of weight because the previous page is just established these guys are similar personality-wise, disposition-wise, and these guys have a similar idea about how to use their quirks. That is the mobility aspect. I like the breakdown of Bakugo that Endeavour gives in this particular page, saying that, hey, you can give your excuses, but it won't matter if someone dies. So that was just, again, Endeavour showing the distinction between the classroom and real life, and just how valuable an excuse is at this point in time. And then we get to see Endeavour stopping a random car, almost crashing into someone. So when you see like Endeavour all of a sudden coming out of nowhere and just stopping a random car, that should tell you how much work Endeavour is putting in general. Like, this guy is moving around the whole place and he's keeping an eye on things. This is like, this guy is active. Like, this is super active. By the time you end this chapter, you should be thinking Endeavour has his city under control. And then you just wonder, like, how many things are going wrong in one place? How many accidents are prone to happen? How many people are prone to be getting away on a getaway vehicle? What is going on? So this just, again, it's elucidating to see what exactly makes the guy that was the once number 2 hero. You could imagine that All Might similarly, because we saw it when he was even injured. All Might was just running all over the place, just helping everyone as much as he could. But it's just like, there's so much opportunity for things to go wrong in the Hero Academia world. Like, if Endeavour wasn't there, those 2 people in the crosswalk would be done. And it's like, oh my gosh, why? Why is there so much accident prone people? Why is there so much crime? What is going on? That's the thing you gotta think about. There's so many heroes, yet there's so many opportunity for things to go wrong. Like, think about that. Even in the Kirishima flashback, even in the Shigaraki flashback, we've been coming back to this idea of there's not a hero around when you need them. That's kind of concerning. And just when you see little things like this that requires a guy like Endeavour being active at all moments in time, you could say that this is also an issue of narrative, where the narrative requires that there be so much problems in order for heroes to logically make sense, or for so many heroes to logically make sense in the world. I'm very interested in this rhetoric. I'm very interested in this storyline. I want to see if, like, this idea of there not being enough heroes, I want to see how much this is going to escalate, because, like, again, the more heroes you need to combat whatever chaos is going on in society, you gotta, like, at some point say, like, maybe society is just way too chaotic at a certain point. I don't know. We'll have to see how the rhetoric develops. Anyway, at that page, we also have Endeavour giving Shoto and Bakugo the same assignment. So when you have Endeavour finally saying this, you look back at those previous pages, Shoto and Bakugo having a chat about how Endeavour uses his fire, and it's like, yes, it makes sense. The chapter built up why these two should be grouped together. They are kind of fighting with the same problem. And then Endeavour goes into the full explanation of storage and release. So I like that he has that explanation, and that we need to get them to a point where they can momentarily draw out maximum firepower. That was pretty cool. And it was, of course, cool to see Izuku saying, oh yeah, Bakugo, you're doing that. So naturally, this page had a lot of power explanation. I really enjoyed it. I like that that Endeavour was breaking it down and telling us exactly, like, yes, you can see them using it, but they need to be using it in a different way. And maybe that different way that they use it isn't something that we can easily see as readers. But it's good to know that this is where Endeavour is breaking them down. And it does follow along with the idea of fundamentals. Anyway, we go into page 10. And what I really enjoyed there is that Endeavour was acknowledging that Izuku can already do it. Izuku's already got that under control. And then he, like, pumps it up to, like, can you do it subconsciously? So I like that he's breaking these things down, and it does fit with his rhetoric. He's taking these big chunks, he's breaking them down into easier to digest chunks. He's telling, like, hey, go do this. I like it because that's kind of similar to what you would do in programming. You take this giant problem, you break it down into small chunks, break it down into small functions that do one specific thing, and you put all those functions together, and then you get, like, that wonderful full program. I do like that idea, and I do like that this is how we're going about it. When Endeavour says to Izuku to forget about Black Whip, I totally agree with him. I feel like it's okay. That can happen later. You got to build up from where we're starting. It might seem like a counterintuitive strategy, but it's better that Izuku doesn't get pulled in multiple directions. I think Izuku taking time to master each quirk individually is probably better than Izuku trying to manage 5 quirks all at once. Like, there is such a thing as too much happening at once. And that does kind of, like, lend itself back to the idea that Shigaraki's currently involved in with his storyline of too many quirks, and the hardware or the body can't handle too many. Their rhetoric. I can't recall it very well right now. Anyway, from there we go into the talk about what exactly is parallel thinking. So I do like the metaphor that the author brought up here, like an Endeavour pointing out the yawning guy who is driving at the same time. Now, one thing I will say first before we get into that is that Endeavour is looking at a guy who is yawning in his car. When you have Endeavour using a guy who's yawning in his car as an example, you can guarantee that Endeavour not only has amazing eyesight to be able to see that, but he's also watching this guy because he's like thinking like, guy, you're gonna crash into someone, aren't you? You're yawning. You should be like watching the road. So it's interesting to see how honed Endeavour is to notice people doing something that could potentially lead to danger. That is really competent. That's supremely competent. Like, oh my gosh. Anyway, that was a really good example of parallel thinking. Getting to a point where you're doing things without even noticing that you're doing them. So I like that. I think that was a great metaphor. I think a lot of people who read that could probably understand it really well. There are things that you can just do by habit after a certain point. One thing that I do appreciate at the bottom of that page is that you can see Izuku's face change as he's hearing Endeavour talk about foundations. He goes from thinking, whoa, and then he's like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. I think that's like the face of admiration there. And then Endeavour goes into the next page of like, yes, there are people who are exceptions. So I like that he still sees All Might as this paragon of ultimate power. But one thing I also like here is that by the time you're reading this page, you realize Endeavour is the hardworking type character. Endeavour is like Mirio. Like Mirio also brought in an idea of training certain fundamentals. When you look at the Mirio and Night Eye training, Night Eye was teaching Mirio like fundamental forms of fighting, that being the basic prediction and all that. So it's interesting to see that Endeavour is ultimately the hardworking type character. Although with Endeavour, you could argue that this is the deconstruction of the hard worker, where like the person is so caught up with trying to use hard work to get above another person that he starts getting blind to everything around him. A guy who like takes training too seriously. And it starts to warp his worldview. You could argue that that's deconstruction that Endeavour is, or early Endeavour symbolized. Anyway, page 12's value, I think, was with Endeavour noting that there are people like All Might in the world, and then just noting his own style of doing things, and then just, you know, giving them the final prompt that, hey, you guys are going to learn here, so make the best of it. From there we go into page 13, which is just Izuku reflecting on the things that Endeavour had said, and then Endeavour giving the ultimate flex of saying, it doesn't matter if you guys mess up, I'm so great, I can cover for you. That was very Endeavour, that was very Bakugo, I think too, fair to say that. So, good stuff. And it's cool that Izuku sees his way forward. And I think one thing that should be noted here is that Endeavour's giving these guys the opportunity to fail. And that's really valuable because in failure, these guys can figure out what they're doing. So I think it's absolutely amazing that Endeavour is letting them have that chance to fail and fix their mistakes on their own. And I'm sure if they start making too many mistakes, or they start going down a path that's not the best for them, I'm sure Endeavour is going to correct them. So I do think, again, this is a setup that works well with competent characters, because you need a character to be able to understand where the mistakes are. From everything that you've seen so far, like I said last week, Endeavour is the best person to be able to train them like this. And then from there, we go into the final page that has Fuyumi in it. And we already talked about the value here. We already talked about Fuyumi. Other thing that I could just add is it's cool to see that she's really happy that her brother has friends and wants them over. Also worth noting, Fuyumi's a teacher, so when she's saying that school's starting again, it's just because she's going to be teaching, she's going to be busy. I realize some people may not know that. Anywhozers, that's it. How many minutes? We got 26 minutes on file. That's good enough. So guys, if I missed anything, please let me know down below. I would love to hear what I missed. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this video. And yeah, till next time. Hope you have an absolutely great day. There is a fly flying around. I'm going to get it.